My name is Rohit Narayan. I lead our customer success delivery teams for Comet and Cured, and have been building and delivering revenue cycle and patient experience solutions for most of my career as a rev cycle director at Epic. Was a founding team member at Salesforce for their healthcare vertical, was the co-founder of Cured, that was part of the acquisition here at Innovacer, and a key component of the patient experience solutions here. And so it's very exciting to have this conversation, be able to connect with these three amazing leaders. As we think about patient experience, we talk a lot about, it's not new. Patient experience has always been a critical thing, but too often it's a typical service goal. We got to make sure we're doing it, treating our patients well. But in today's market, what's super critical is that this is a key component for growth. And so that's kind of completely changing how we're approaching it. And those series of moments that occur from a patient prior to an appointment is what everyone calls the front door. We all know about that. And that front door determines growth. Does a patient move forward and get their care needs, or do they silently drop off, right? A critical issue. And what makes this even more challenging is the front door is managed by multiple teams. We've got marketing, who's driving outreach and engagement. We've got patient access that's managing the call center and scheduling. We've got service line admins that are also doing their own ad hoc projects. So from a patient lens, it's one engagement from a health organization, and that experience can be both coordinated or maybe fragmented. And from a front door perspective, from a growth lens, patients are increasingly willing to switch providers, where they can find easier access for a better experience, easier access to care, and an ease of navigation. And so such a critical component when we think about what's going on today, and I'm excited to be talking about leaders here that are redesigning what the operating models around patient engagement and access. And so let's just do a quick round of introductions here. We'll just start with you, Chad, and go from there.
Chad Milam. I'm Digital Director of Strategy and Experience for Vail Health, rural mountain community. Most of you guys have probably heard of Vail, Colorado. That's where we're located. I kind of wear multiple hats within our organization, so I oversee all the digital marketing, which you just touched on. I also oversee digital patient experience, which we're not good at. And I recently just became our lead change manager or change practitioner for our evolution from 3 disparate EMRs down to 1 new EMR. And we'll touch on that in a little bit. But yeah, our patient experience right now leaves a lot to be desired. And for us in a rural community, just real quick, rural healthcare, anyone? Just 2 of us. All right, I'm talking to you today. But for a lot of us in mountains community or rural communities, competition doesn't look the same for us. We don't really have competitors. The competition is really not getting care, right? And so when we add friction, they just don't come. So.
Hi, Bill Citro, Ortho Nebraska. We're a musculoskeletal health system out of Omaha. So we do the full continuum for orthopedics. So ER, orthopedic urgent care, physical therapy, imaging, et cetera. We do a little over 16,000 procedures a year. And Ortho Nebraska is really interesting. You talk about digital experience. I think we've made a lot of strides there. We're an interesting blend of rural and, because we're primarily based out of Omaha, which is more of a metro area, but we have a lot of rural surrounding communities that come to us for care as well. And then we go into those communities as well. So be an interesting blend for the conversation.
Thank you.
Ash Tengshe, I'm SVP, Product Engineering and Infrastructure at City of Hope. I've been there just under a year. City of Hope is 112 years old organization, one of the highest rated NCI comprehensive cancer care center. We used to be just one big cancer care center in LA area, but now with acquisitions, we are 5 in 5 regions. And obviously, defeating cancer, delivering hope is our main motto, but also along with that, we are big into research. So our claim to fame, for example, is one of the claim to fames is we were the birthplace of biotech and inventors or co-patented synthetic insulin back in the day, working with Genentech. So when a patient wants to come to City of Hope, it's not just an appointment. For them, they're really entrusting their lives to us. And so patient access is really an important part. It's very different from my previous roles with other organizations where you could, in many cases, or most of the patient access could be related to primary care. This is very specialty cancer care. And so excited to talk to you all about it.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Well, exactly. And can be first on deck here, Ash. No, this is great, and especially in thinking about what that patient experience means in today. Again, how is that an operating lever for growth? And so, kind of a first kind of kickoff question. We'll go to you, Ash. But what does the front door need to get right in order to make sure that we have patients that are engaging and coming in for care?
Yeah. So, like I said, patients when they choose us right now at City of Hope, they are not just choosing an appointment or a doctor, they're entrusting us with their lives. Even in my short 7-8 months that I've been here, when I've met patients or met people on the flights who said they got care at City of Hope, they didn't say that I got care at City of Hope or that it was a good digital experience or this or that. They basically said, "You saved my life. Your organization saved my life." And so it is. What and some of the things I want to highlight with that is either people look up us because of our reputation and they're already diagnosed with cancer. They want to come to one of the best places to get care. They could be a referral. So sometimes it's not always a patient calling us. It is a referring physician calling us. So we have these channels and we need to just get better and better at them. Because first is when those interactions, whether it's call, whether it's digital, when they're seamless, they are compassionate, they're clear, that builds trust. And we really have to establish trust right away. Again, because someone's entrusting a very critical point of their emotion. It's an emotional moment for someone picking their cancer care providers. And so we want to really be what we have realized also is that if we have speed and clarity in those interactions, not only there's trust, but there's also a perception of competence in the organization. And so for us, it's really digital we do digital appointing, et cetera. It is somewhat hard because, again, like I said, it's when the patient comes in, there is a lot of history that we need to first get along with the patient. And also with that, we have to see what kind of cancer they have, what location they are in, what is their ability to go across locations, the places they go to. Will that place will they need imaging? What imaging capabilities will that place need? If they need genetic testing, etc. And so there's many factors. Now there's care guidelines for all of these, and we could digitize them and we could make it more self-service. But today, majority of this, we do it through our call center. So we spend a lot of time in our call center training and educating and making sure that there is, again, this knowledgeable, compassionate care that's being delivered.
That's great. Bill, what about from you from your perspective, especially when you're thinking about the marketing and patient access side, about how they're engaging patients in the right way to schedule their care?
Yeah, so for us in orthopedics, access is number one. It's actually our number one strategic imperative as set forth by our leadership group, because if you think about maybe in contrast to something like cancer, orthopedics, until you've had surgery, at least the switching costs are very low. You can go see somebody for a knee and then be like, I didn't like that guy, I'm going to go right down the street to somebody else. So it's very episodic in nature rather than chronic care management, I guess is another way to put that. So we put a lot of focus on it. We've really invested in online scheduling in the past few years, and we're up to about 10% of our total volume being scheduled online. So that's been great to see, and we want to continue to lean into that and grow that. We've also really focused a lot on using SMS as opposed to email or the call center, because that's what our patients have told us they want. We actually have 80% of our 85-ish% of our patients doing SMS as the primary mode of communication now. And so we'll probably get a little bit more into this later, but like, you think about that shift of, that's what I'm thinking a lot about as a change management agent, is like, how do we make that shift in our organization from I need to pick up the phone and call this patient to I need to text this patient. And that there's both pros and cons, right? When you get into like, well, there's more of the human side of the conversation, or, but texting is what the patients want, unless this is like, maybe you're giving them a cancer diagnosis, you don't want to do that over text. Yeah. So, but yeah, hey, you want to come in next week to get this checked out. Hey, how's physical therapy going? Those kinds of things can be done via text, right? And more efficiently and with a higher patient satisfaction, higher patient experience. The last thing I'll say about, I guess, the digital front door is it is something that we are very in tune of with measuring. We really try to push back against the, we all have known those physicians who they wear a badge of honor that they take 6 months to get in to see them. And we really push back on that because it's just not a helpful mentality when you're trying to actually impact care and get more people in. Why would you want that to be the case when you're trying to save more lives or make more of an impact in your community? It's just antithetical to growth, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a great call out. It's definitely an area we want to be diving into. What are those frictions into access to care? Before we get to that, Bo, Chad, from your sense, what about creating that ideal front door experience of what marketing is doing and what Access Center is doing? What are kind of strategies are you putting in place at Vail?
So we'll look at it from two different lenses, right? The digital front door. Honestly, right now, we've made it hard, right? We basically have hired a bouncer to stand in front of our hospital and get in the way a little bit, maybe punch you in the chest a few times just to make sure that it's as hard as possible for you to enter. So us moving to one EMR is going to really help with that, right? It's going to give us a lot more tools in our toolbox that allow us to, welcome that person in. We have primary care, we have emergency care, we have orthopedics, we have cancer. But right now, a patient can't navigate that themselves because of the position we've put them in. So that work is being done. But you also need to kind of pull people in, right? So where we live, I did a race yesterday, and I had a 60-year-old woman go flying by me uphill. Where we live, the people's mentality is different. Everyone wants to be outdoors. Everyone wants to be active. And so you have to treat them that way. But they also have a fierce independence to themselves, for the most part. And so outreach to patients and reminding them why you moved to the mountains, why you want to be here, things you want to be doing. How many days did you get on the snow last year? Is that the same as you did this year? And if not, why not? So can we bring you in, right? So we got to kind of pull people in because no one wants to engage with the healthcare system, right? You kind of have to remind them what the benefit of that is.
Absolutely. Thinking about what that front door is, engaging with your patients. We talked about some channel tactics. You mentioned SMS. You've talked about reaching out, email, and a key component of reminding them they need care and, providing those touch points. And both of you, Ash and Bill, kind of talked about, the challenges of scheduling, right? Especially from a cancer perspective. It's not great, you're calling in, let's get you scheduled. A number of intake questions and maybe speed if we're thinking about second opinions. And Bill, from a musculoskeletal perspective, how quickly it's more episodic, so we might need to work, quicker to get people in because they might be shopping around as well. What kind of access challenges have you seen that you've been trying to solution around and come up with, certain strategies? You already mentioned one, Bill, already with SMS, but kind of curious, what kind of broader challenges have you seen that you've been trying to resolve?
Well, we have a new one that just got thrown at me this week with United Healthcare suddenly requiring a prior auth for any new patient, which is a nice, fun one. So I'm working on that change to our online scheduling right now. So there's always curveballs that are going to be thrown at us, right? I think it's having the technology that's able to help solution for those curveballs, and I think also having the strategies in place so that you kind of can see what's coming and be able to adapt to things like that. I think from an access perspective, there are lots of I mean, there's lots of levers we can pull, right? We do things in the call center. We do things with online scheduling. There are easily ways, I was thinking earlier today about the intersection between population health and marketing and some of the things we do, because typically I think those worlds, we think of them as very different. But then a lot of the outreach, the example that was given was, hey, let's try emailing them, and then let's try texting them, and then let's try calling them. And I was sitting there thinking, no, that's not what we should be doing. We should be asking them, because they're happy to tell us, hey, I want texts, or I want emails, or I want calls, and then we should say first preference 1, fallback 2, fallback 3. So really rethinking applying some of this the way marketers have always thought to population health. And Innovaccer and all the people here, we have the tools to do these things. We just have to be very thoughtful about it.
Yeah, that's great. And as Ash, from your perspective too, right? Yeah. Curious, same kind of question. What access challenges have you seen, and what kind of strategies have you put in place to solve some of that?
Yeah, when you think of access challenges with us, I think definitely it's the availability. We have some of the best providers in cancer care, but at the same time, the best providers in cancer care also come with, they want to protect their schedules. They don't want to put their schedules out for just anybody else to schedule, so it's go through their office, right? So the whole thing about digitizing, what we do today is patients that are not on a treatment plan, we have that online scheduling available. But those that are on a treatment plan and new patients, those are our kind of next frontiers. And it's not just a matter of data and process and all that care guidelines. It's also a matter of cultural importance in terms of making people changing the way we do things, and providing more autonomy and more self-service into our patients' hands. At the same time, it could get difficult because with so many factors to think about for the right appointment type for that type of condition, you could end up with wrong appointment types, and they're very frustrating, and that could end up the patient going somewhere else. So we have to do it thoughtfully. That's the main challenging area from a patient access. The other challenging area is when we do find someone who is coming in and start talking to them, and start getting them into appointment. There's that whole process of getting their entire history. This case history could be extremely large. Many cases, they've already gone to 3-4 other health systems. They have a long history. It could be 500 plus different media, x-rays, and all kinds of records, some accessible through the Epic connectivity, some not available. So really have to get all those in. So what we are doing right now, that used to take about, and currently it still takes about 4 to 5 hours on the call sometimes, getting everything done. So we are putting agents in that space. Part of it is also convenience for the patient, because they don't have to call and wait. So it is at their time. It's almost like a TurboTax kind of walkthrough, and it'll help you upload everything, help you with the communications, help you with all that. So that's something we are putting. So it's really getting the history in. Our third biggest challenge for a new patient is for a provider to get up to date with their case history. So that used to take 4 to 5 hours in complex cases. So on that, we have our own Hope LLM, which is a LLM solution, but trained on our data, our oncology data, and that now is allowing most of our providers to do that case summarization and case progression, tumor progression, et cetera, learn all that in about 20, 25 minutes. And so that's that open time could be used towards care delivery. And so I think those are our 3 biggest barriers to getting patient access be as smooth as possible.
Hearing that long intake window, and especially with the amount of time being spent, did you have situations of patients with that stalling out and you're having to re-engage them, keep them warm? Has that been something you've had to put in processes? And
I think the one thing, you said bouncer outside the hospital, right? I think the thing is everybody else has a bouncer outside their hospital too. So it's not just us, right? They have friction everywhere else. So especially, I mean, again, I'm talking about specialty cancer care. And so, you know, it's not about accepting friction and saying everyone else has it, so we can have it too. It's really overcoming friction. And yeah, so there is, I think the primary reason when we have a dropout or you know, someone goes somewhere else, it's really because of timing. It's they want to see someone this week, and you know, in many of our centers, we can make it available within a week, within 2 weeks, that kind of a specialty appointment. But depending on the case, it may not happen that fast. And again, because of these barriers of pre-auth and financial eligibility, pre-auth, financial assistance, and all the case transfers and all that kind of, it may not happen in 1 to 2 weeks. And so people sometimes, when they leave, primary reason is because of that time that it takes.
Chad, that bouncer analogy was yours. Have you had some strategies that have been successful to kind of, you know, take away that bouncer that's out front and make it a little bit more appealing and warm?
We're trying. So one of the main issues we had, and just to paint a little bit of a picture, where we live, if you haven't been to Vail, we've got north and south of us, there's nothing, right? It's just mountains. On the west side of us is a canyon that, because semis can't drive on ice, tends to close down a lot. And on the east side of us is 2 mountain passes to get down the mountain to Denver. So, and it's 2 hours. So we're kind of landlocked. And so one of the things we have a problem with is just staff, right? Hiring staff. I just looked at the report this morning. So on average, Tuesdays, any month, but Tuesdays between 9 and 10, we get about 250 phone calls. We're a population of 55,000 people, locals. It bumps up to about 125,000 in the winter when all the visitors come. So we've got a small staff, 10 to 15 people, trying to field 225 to 250 calls in an hour. It's Tuesday from 9 to 10, so you can imagine what Wednesdays and Mondays look like. And so we run into a problem where our schedulers, our part-time staff, that there's not an abundance of because we don't have suburbs to draw from, they get overworked, they get overwhelmed, and we don't return calls. And so we've really started to try to do a one-touch resolution where we're going to try to get 80% of all calls that come in resolved on that first call. And that's really meant that we have to reallocate and retrain a lot of staff. We can't hire more people. We can't. It's just hard. So we had to start to really retrain and reallocate stuff, right? And so that, while that's not digital front door, that is a front door, right? That phone is just as important as the website. And so when you turn your attention to the website, well, now what can we handle from a digital standpoint? And they've already said the answer, right? But the one thing I would try to add to that is look at the metrics. The metrics really matter. So as we've rolled out online scheduling, there'll be times where I'm looking at them like, what is going on? And I'll see we'll have a significant drop in actual scheduled appointments versus what I would call failures. And when you look at it, you're like, what's going on? And you see what happened last week was we saw about half of our failures for a certain service line were people falling off at the time stage, right? They'd have identified their provider. They were now going to book a time and a day. They couldn't find a time and a day. It was too far out. And so we have a similar problem where we're very fortunate where we live. We get a lot of people that as they're retiring or on their way out, very wealthy providers, they like to come here and they'll work for us for a few years. Well, maybe their schedules aren't the same, or we only have 2 or 3 of that specialty provider. So if one goes on vacation for 2 weeks, and so then we'll start seeing some of our metrics dip when we notice this. And if we ask, they say, well, yeah, they went on vacation or they had an illness or something like that. So really look at your KPIs and keep an eye on those because there might be some false negatives in there that you know, otherwise you might react poorly to.
No, that's great. And especially just continuing to hear those themes and patterns on, you know, that level of engagement to keeping folks engaged. And I love that you jumped into metrics, something I want to get into, but I'm sure a lot of great successes that you've had. I'm kind of curious, what successes have you seen putting in strategies to reduce the friction of coming in, driving that digital front door? Bill, what kind of successes have you seen kind of result of some of the strategies you put in place?
Yeah, so I already talked about the online scheduling. That's a big one. And I actually, real quick before we go there, you just made me think of something else, Chad, is the APP utilization is another thing to help with some of those provider out of offices or when providers are really backed up. We actually had 3 physicians leave to go to Antarctica to be there for like a sabbatical for like a month. And like in the middle of fourth quarter, nobody, that's the problem. They don't ask for approval. So that happened, and we were like, well, our November numbers are in the tank. But like, that's where we've really, over the past few years, gone to trying to lever APPs more, even for new patients. So that's about there's different philosophies on this with physicians, but I'm really trying to figure out how to do that in a smart way and get them to work more as a team and less as I'm staying in my lane type of approach. And so that's been really successful. I think we've gone from roughly 13% of patients being seen by an APP to closer to 19%, if I'm not mistaken. So that's been good. But back to the metrics. Really, for us, if it's a marketing initiative, is that kind of what we're talking about here? Yeah. So from a marketing perspective, I think you really have to get to the dollars. And I feel strongly about this because that's when the conversation changes with your finance team. From marketing as a cost to marketing as an investment and a value driver. So with the help of Innovacer, we've been able to, pass through not just revenue, not just charges, but contribution margin, and have it tracked to the patient. Now, I will say caveat, people who do day-to-day marketing know you cannot measure everything. There's simply no way. Things coming over on the phone are harder to measure. And then sort of the halo effect is you can try to approximate it, but it's hard to measure. But the few things that you can measure, when you can prove those wins, those are really meaningful. And so for us, that's really 2 things. We do what we call our pain assessments on our website. So it's you think of it, we got it approved clinically. If you're familiar with like the WHO's or the COO's forms, we basically do a pain assessment based on those forms for hip and knees. Then we have other ones for other body parts. But patients take those and then we track them and do outreach campaigns based on their acuity scores and based on what they've told us in that, the custom parts of what they're looking to get out of a potential treatment, and follow up with them in a very personalized way so that we can track them all the way through and get not only the initial appointment, which is step 1, but all the downstream, the therapy, the surgery, the imaging, all the things that come there. So that's the number one, I think the holy grail that you want to get to is the financial side.
And then are you seeing some positive success with there? Is that something that's been shared with executive leadership, finance? How are they kind of seeing the work effort managed by you and your team, and what's their perspective on it?
Yeah, exactly. That's what you do. You report that out to your finance team, and then the conversation changes because it's like, oh, if I give you $1, you're going to give me $1.50 back, or whatever your metric is for your organization, right? And then you have you still have some of the more brand level marketing that you have to do, the advertising stuff that's a little bit harder to measure, the traditional media, but we know that that's important too in marketing, and we don't want to lose sight of that because that drives everything. With that, we try to do correlation too. So we may have this hard metric, but also, when we're in market on TV, let's just say, well, we see an uptick in our pain assessments, and so we know that that's driving the downstream as well.
That's great. And it sounds like, again, that continued socialization of what the team is doing, getting in front of finance. This is the work the team is doing. These are the financial impacts that we're seeing. That's great that process is in place and probably continuing to shine a positive light about what the team is doing. And, again, the patient experience, that digital front door, really ultimately supporting, the money and the growth for the organization. So.
Yeah, I think the credibility is also incredibly important. So we also will acknowledge when we weren't successful from a financial perspective, and then have a reason. It may not be we might not know exactly why, but at least have a hypothesis and say, hey, we're going to invest here, or we're going to tweak this. Here's our remediation plan, or I hate that word, but here's our recommendations for how we move to do this for the second go around.
Great. Can
Chad?
I compliment that real quick?
Please.
I'm going to compliment that real quick. That was perfect. always acknowledge your failures because it does build credibilities, and then the successes are much more well received. And can I answer his question too?
Please.
All right.
Yes.
I got the mic, so I'm just going to keep going. And I'm partially going to do this because he's in here. So Ari and Cured. Cured's how we kind of got introduced to Innovacer. And it's been a great product for us because, like I said earlier, we got to find ways to pull people in. And where we live, the community's fairly healthy. They kind of, I feel fine, so I'm not going to worry about it. We did a very, very simple outreach campaign where we tied it into our data lake. And Ari and Mitch both were great partners in this because I was wondering how could we pull this off. And the idea was, can we find lapsed patients? And we went real simple. Like, can we just find lapsed mammogram women that haven't been in for some period of time, and identify them? So I worked with our oncology team, I worked with our imaging team to say, give me a definition of what these should look like from, CPT codes and all that stuff I don't understand. And we built this audience. And it populates right into Cured, and every night it sends out this email. And I'm able to watch actual appointments show up in our EHR and then encounters. So appointments, future state encounters, been realized appointments. And our, senior level leaders are like watching that. And it's like, yeah, we spent 2 hours, maybe, working on that. And it's just sitting there spinning in the background. And we've expanded it. Ari's kind of helped with leading that. We've expanded it to see how far can we take it, how many more people can we start to outreach. And now we're reaching out to the service line saying, can we step and repeat this? Does it make sense? Is there an audience that makes sense to reach out to and pull in? But when it doesn't work, and I go back to what Bill says, we're real quick to raise our hands. It does build credibility so that when I come to the table, they know they can trust at least my recommendation, and I'll be honest with them if it works or not.
That's really great. Ash, anything from your perspective? It's coming to you. It's coming to you next. But especially with a lot of the, what successes have you seen? How has executive and finance really looked at, especially with, again, long intake and some of the challenges that you've seen? Definitely a material impact to move faster and where patients can come in.
Yeah, what happened historically is, like I said, when I say historically, it sounds like 80s, but I mean 5 years ago. We were LA, the big cancer center in LA. Again, great reputation. And so there was, the demand supply was actually where, there was more demand than supply. And so it wasn't really that important to do marketing. It wasn't really that important to do really any kind of extra outreach. There were more patients wanting to come in. And in fact, it was the case where they would evaluate if this is a good case for City of Hope to take on, or this could be done, this is simple enough, could be done anywhere else. So that's the situation 5 years ago. And then there was acquisition of Cancer Centers of America that got us locations in Phoenix, Chicago, and Atlanta. And they, on the other hand, were on the opposite side of the spectrum. They had great marketing capabilities, and they were really, and they had more supply than the demand. And so they had really perfected the marketing side of it, from everything from, and I don't know, before that I didn't work with marketing teams, so a lot of new learning in the last 6 months where these URLs are changed every 2 hours. And so when the referral link comes in, they know exactly from which source did this come in, based on the timing and the URL used. And so now they can work with those to tune the advertising cost of those based on that, how many clicks are actually coming in and turning into appointments and encounters, et cetera. So they were really good at this, and now we are trying to utilize some of that capability, not because, again, we have excess capacity. We still, our LA centers are more demand than supply, but try to learn from that and really see how do we maximize just patient convenience and patient, like, clearly identifying this is the right fit, this is the right location, this is the right care they need, et cetera, and using some of the digital tooling that the marketing team had built. Successes, yes, like I counted a few before, but so for all the calls, for example, we look at a satisfaction metric. We are running about 4.7 on a 5 scale. And then it's really the amount, how much can we automate without losing. So something that I think you said, I want to just rephrase it and say it again, is we want to automate transactions, want to automate logistics but we want to, keep that deep human connection. And what we want to do is humanize vulnerabilities so that those things where we have to, talk about diagnosis, or we have to talk about, or there's fear about what happens next, apprehension, all that all those cases, all those conversations are not digital, are not, agent-based. Those are warm, compassionate humans who are knowledgeable about that area and can provide a sense of assurance to the patient that, So that's a thin line. I mean, more you digitize and more you agentize everything, that line can be crossed. And so success would be to implement it with clearly keeping those guidelines in mind and making sure that while we automate transactions, we are really building that human touch.
That's great. And as we, Chad, you kind of started highlighting this of how you're thinking about pulling patients in and getting into that targeted approach about, well, let's look at our mammography screening campaign and what we can be going after. One key component to think about, general outreach or continuing to gauge folks that have stalled or lapsed, it's the personalization, right? And how do we continue to know the preferences of a patient? So I'm kind of curious, Bill, what does personalization mean to you, and how are you trying to apply that in, the strategies from a marketing and access center perspective?
Don't be creepy, but use the data in a responsible way. I think that's been clearly what I mean when you're looking at doing some of these personalization things. It can feel you can get there, right? But I think generally my stance on what consumers have said is, and especially I think this is especially true in healthcare. I'm talking a little bit more broad when I say consumers, but in healthcare, they know we have their data. It's just a matter of how we're using it, right? So it's not a matter of if we're using it, it's a matter of how. And so if you can use it in a way that benefits them, then that's a good thing. If you're adding value to them, then that's a good thing. Like the example I said before about if we have really good data flow for their contact preferences, that's a good use of data. They're going to appreciate that we're reaching out to them in the way they want to be communicated with. If we're using it to screen Medicaid patient population out of our outreach because we're not going to get as good a financial return, that's unethical. That's a bad way of personalizing. So that's the way I think about it overall. And then the other big thing we're doing in the personalization space, and I think this is a little bit of the secret sauce, is bringing in the consumer data into the patient data and using it to enrich our patient data. So we can do things like figure out, who's watching Amazon Prime amongst a patient cohort, or figure out who is having sleeping problems amongst our patient cohort. So maybe they're having shoulder problems, but we know their motivation to fix that is because they're having trouble sleeping. So we can make our marketing messaging speak to that, and how much more meaningful is that to you, knowing that they understand the problem that you're trying to solve for them.
Great. Chad, something you got to add on there?
I've always got something to add. So personalization, that's a hard word to say, really kind of comes down to two things, right? So it's like timing and relevance. And if you can hit those two things, then personalization can mean a lot of things. And that's a really good example. We even went simpler. We have a small team that's trying to manage a lot of brands. And so, again, working with Mitch and Ari, sorry, keep calling you out. We talked through ways that we could cull down. We have a very robust and engaged email audience. I don't know why, but they are. It's sizable. They like getting content from us. But we were having a lot of content. And so we did some reporting and found out if we just trim it down a little. Well, once we trimmed down the content, that allowed us to produce more better content. Kind of going back to what you were saying about, can we use some of that consumer data? We went super simple, and we just segmented our audience to what they've indicated is either if they feel like they're more female or more male. And now, last month, we sent out an email, and the women got, a breast message, and the men got a prostate message, right? So just becoming a little bit more relevant. You guys have recently launched with dynamic content, so we're starting to play with that and leverage that, so it's a little easier for us to send to an audience and have it kind of break up the content based on what we know about them. So by culling down our content, we've allowed our team to expand how much content they can create that's more relevant. And it's starting to pay off. At least the analytics are looking positive.
That's great. Again, what's the connection that you're going to make them take action? And Bill?
I was just going to build on. I love that example because I think a lot of this boils down to don't send me crap that doesn't apply to me, right? Like that as a consumer, you guys can all relate to this. That is what annoys you more than anything else. You know I'm a man. Why are you sending me something about breast cancer, right? Like it just doesn't make sense. What do you got?
Should we let Ash talk sometime?
Yeah. All right. Give it to me.
The Bill and Chad show, but that's all right. No, it's
No, I mean, you guys are like into your things. It's good. But, again, not this, like I said, here it's cancer care, but my past is history, decade of other healthcare organization and work. So the other thing is really not just to send messages that ask them to take action, give them that on a platter. Mm-hmm. So something that says, for example, this is innovation, and I don't think it ever made it to production, but something I remember from 8-9 years ago was we had data on who, we worked with some respiratory providers and then pulmonologists, right? That are called, yeah. And we worked with them on. We knew who had inhalers, and we knew who when was their last inhaler pickup. We had our own pharmacies. We knew, et cetera. And we also knew, generally from their zip codes and their AQ, the air quality index for those zip codes, right? So now we could combine all of that, and we could pop a message on their, some of the people who ran digital are right here in the room, but and put a message on their mobile app that says, look, your last inhaler pickup was over 60 days ago, and air quality is bad, but don't tell them to go get pickup. Just pop up a action call to action right there that says, click here to get it delivered overnight to you, right? So similar, I think when you can personalize it, but also instead of saying, that you haven't had a shot, flu shot or whatever else, and go get a shot or a mammogram or anything else, if we can personalize, if we can automate the next step and say, based on their preferences and based on their past activity, pop up a couple of appointment times, Friday 3 p.m., Monday 5 p.m., just click on one and you're done, right? That's I think, the real value.
Oh, absolutely. And that's, I think, a key aspect, right? Like when you think about the care that's provided, and let me re-summarize the question. It's not just about new patients, it's about what about your existing patients and how are you engaging with them? Such a critical aspect where at that point your entire population are your prospects and leads, and everyone's due for a new care. And so it's continuing about how are you educating about available services? Did they come in through specialty and they're not aware from primary care? Did they come in through primary care and are they aware of other specialty services? So healthcare access is hard. Going to a website, calling in, where do I need to know? And so every patient needs to be communicated of how do we continue to promote available services and how do we remind you to take action. I'll kind of make a comment in my kind of wrap up here, but anything else that anybody else wants to answer on that one?
I was going to say, just where we live, we don't have new patients really. We're not going to draw from, we just aren't. And so everything you heard me talk about, my whole world is trying to keep our existing population coming to us. If I really mess up that digital front door, side door, back door, whatever you want to call it, I've put them in a position where they either don't get care or they're driving 2 hours to Denver, and in the winter it's 3 or 4, or they're having to go through a canyon. And so, I think a lot of it, while sometimes people think of, acquiring new, I think a lot of these same strategies can be used to just retain existing, and you never want to lose sight of them.
And we are definitely going to be moving on to the next session. So I'll kind of just wrapping up, especially kind of thinking about patient experience as a growth driver, what you've heard today, right? City of Hope today, 5 years ago, it wasn't kind of a core focus, but then it became a focus about how we're thinking about marketing an access center to be engaging our patients and it being a critical aspect to convert patients and thinking about the right tools to accelerate the intake time, thinking about how we're pulling in the appropriate patients because otherwise they're not going to drive to their care need. How are we outreaching to them in their related preferences that we can say, oh, they prefer SMS, let's use SMS. and ultimately thinking about the nuance, right? From City of Hope being a specialized cancer center to Ortho Nebraska, and having it very specific for orthopedics. For Vail Health, both rural communities, different ways you need to engage, but you need the same kind of tools to make it simple and not be creepy and just make it easy to engage. And so a lot. No, that's great, but it really comes back down into you're not a cost center, but you're driving investment and value for the organization. So appreciate everybody's time here. A lot of great themes here.